All right. Welcome, everybody. It is February 21st, 2023, and this is the bi-weekly Cloud Custodian community meeting. Two quick things to remember is that we do record these meetings and put them on YouTube, so please be cognizant of that. And secondly, we are under the CNCF's Code of Conduct, so please be excellent to each other. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Everybody see it? Do y'all prefer the working view or the rendered view? It's fine, I think. Some quick things before we get started. Just a heads up about Python 3.7 this year if you're watching this in the video. Sunny, is there any release things that we want to talk about? Oh.
Sorry, that's on mute. The release did go out last week, and it seems to be a recurring problem with the S3 output stuff. But that hasn't really, it's not a regression or anything like that. It's continued headache from S3 output, which I think Kapil had a PR out for. I'll let Kapil talk about it if he wants.
I mean, it's a regression. I would say it's like, I think it goes back to, like, I think trying to catalog our sorted history with this, but I think it goes back to roughly 9.14 was the last version without it. But the regression only hit certain people at certain things, but effectively we stuck like a get bucket location. So what was the issue? The issue was we were turning people that were operating cross region or cross region, cross account or not, and we're seeing errors on writes effectively where they were executing from Custodian from a different region than where they wanted to write the results to. That would potentially get these errors, and we tried to solve it by tossing in a get bucket location. That actually means that we have to do an API call to get a bucket location, and that results in lots of access denied errors because we now have to get a different permission, and that will actually never work for cross-region bucket access because it just doesn't work. I was trying to figure out if you could actually do it via some form of embedded policy, etc. But like, nutshell, it wasn't really we changed permissions effectively on something common, and it wasn't really clear that it was viable for some of these cases that we were being used for. AJ added in the ability to use anonymous HTTP calls to figure out the bucket location, but we were doing it because we were doing it down at the output level. We would get that we would do those curls effectively in the fan out in the leaf location for something like C7N org. If you were executing against 100 accounts in 100 regions, it's 1,000, or sorry, 10,000 API calls. And so moving it up a level, moving the anonymous checking up a level effectively solves both issues, and also removing the old API call introduction that we did. So there was a lot of permutations on this. Effectively, you can now explicitly specify your output region on your bucket when you pass in the output location. There was issues with Lambda was one of the issues, because so there's issues with Lambda, there's issues with cross account, there's issues with different partitions. This hopefully resolves all of them. That was probably the TLDR, and also greatly reduces the volume of API call or HTTP calls we have to make, and introduces some retries in the face of common issues we've seen that people have reported as far as intermediary proxies and other things, and actual HTTP errors or slowdowns from the actual API itself. But yeah.
Just a question on that. So this is it's been I guess an issue for a while, going back quite a few versions. This isn't something that yeah, is found on like the latest release or anything like that exclusively. Okay, cool.
It goes back, I think 9.14 is what I saw people were saying they were reverting back to try to avoid stepping on this. I think it's, some degree of, we tried to fix it multiple times along the way, but I don't think we nailed it till recently.
Cool. So that'll be available in 9.24?
Yes, although I would definitely consider a patch release. I don't know, more releasing 9.24 early, just to be able, like, I haven't closed out the underlying issues for those because I want things to be. We haven't gotten to that level yet. Generally speaking, we've generally closed issues and easily they hit trunk, but like at a certain degree of maturity, you don't close issues till a user can get the release in their hands. And so we're like, at least for these, I'm not going to do it because it was a regression until it's actually available. So I definitely would consider pushing up 9.24 to the first week of March. I think you need like potentially two different tags, like fixed committed, so then you like that you tag issues with, so you can like find all the fixed committed issues and mark them closed for the release is another way of doing it. There's definitely more closed for it.
Which issue were we talking about? Sorry, I had a crash there.
It's a closed PR from
82, 89 PR.
Got you.
I try to document the journey, although I don't know if I've documented the actual fix. But yeah.
Cool. So we're thinking
LDR, I think, for the actual fix. Yeah.
Okay. Basically, probably a couple of weeks out, and then maybe we'll be able to consume this in a release.
Yeah, like I said, yeah, first week of March, so that's probably maybe a little over 2 weeks.
Okay, cool.
All right. Anything left on this one? All right. Next, we had this one, 8232, add a new action to enable audit logs to CloudWatch.
Yeah, I think I just need to relook at this one.
Yeah. Going on here. You looked at it before. I think you just got to circle back.
Times before, I just need to go refresh pass at it.
All right. Any other comments on this one from anyone? Right. I see nodding. Oh, here's the Kafka one, 8077. Migrate to list clusters version 2.
Yeah, so we noticed, Darren, you want me to just kind of summarize it?
Yeah, you have more context. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, we have some policies that are kind of config based, and they're checking, they were checking specific, attributes that were available only on basically provision clusters. With this change, this adds in serverless resource types as well, is my understanding. So this looks like it's going to break some of our existing integrations, basically because now we're getting serverless resources, and we don't see a way to basically like server side filter those things out. So just it was just a call out really that this
right. You're using config pull root.
config pull rule. Yeah.
So I think something I was just thinking aloud, like we call out. Is there a way to tell inside of a given cluster if it's serverless or not? Because I think it was in the enclosure. Getting to the data structures, we removed the enclosure. I don't know if it was still distinguishable directly from the underlying, resource itself as like an additional value filter.
Yeah, there should be. So, can you go to files changed, George?
So I believe the list cluster
There should be
feature,
like a
API. It does allow you to pass in a filter to say what kind of cluster you want to list.
there does, yeah, but from a client side filtering perspective. So sorry,
Yeah,
scroll
so-
up a little bit. There's that
Yeah.
serverless.
This right
Yeah,
here.
we see that cluster type was added, so now with this version we're able to basically just do like a value filter thing. But the problem is with config is it still lists out the resources, so like we still will have the resources showing as compliant or non-compliant. And something we noticed with the serverless resource types in AWS config is the mapping is actually incorrect. And we don't know why that is. That might be a limitation on the config side. But for provision clusters, the config mapping shows up beautifully. For serverless, you get an error. So when we try to do stuff like collect evidence or configuration items, we're not able to do that for serverless. So we're kind of introducing, this new resource type that doesn't really play nicely with config.
So this came up with RDS as well, like wanting to target a config role policy at just a subset of the full resources. Like,
Yeah, like by engine type or something.
yeah, and so I think when we went to merge that, I think there was also I added the notion of like, hey, we could have a not I forgot the phrase for config, not evaluated, not we could add an additional set of filters under mode for the resources that we are like these not applicable. So that when we go to evaluate the resources, we'll additionally evaluate those sets of filters, and if they match, then because I mean it's three valued logic, right? Right now we're just in Boolean where we just do compliant, not compliant. But if we add in the third option, the third set of it, we make that available as an additional set of filters that are not in the policy body but are actually in the mode. Then we could get that additional three value logic, which will give that better separation.
Do you prefer that over just adding support for server-side filter?
I mean,
Okay.
both are good. I want to check, like, if I was looking about the problem, like this is a general class of problem.
Yeah, it sounds more like a general problem that we might want to add to config.
This gives us something that we've already seen before, and it gives us a workaround for this and future.
Okay. Steven, you understand what Kapil was saying? Because we were talking about adding it at the server side, but then to do that, it will be more like specific to each resources. But here, if we do it at the config level, we can add in a new feature to a config poll rule, for example, that allow us to do additional filtering to only filter the resources that we're interested in. And that would be a better solve for any future resources that might have the same problem.
Yeah, so basically just excluding certain resources from.
Because right now I just grab everything.
Yeah, sort of get it. Don't know how that would work. So yeah, Darren, maybe we can circle back on that.
I mean, I think the server-side query stuff, like, yeah, I do agree that we should probably just put that in anyway. That can close the gap for the time being.
Yeah, we might. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we might put in a quick ad for that, just so we can upgrade to the latest version and work on the longer term fix too.
Yeah. I mean, our workaround right now is we're thinking of just marking serverless as compliant and just adding an additional filter to, make sure that we're only kind of evaluating provision types for non-compliance, and then just, show serverless clusters as compliant. But yeah, we do sort of have that config mapping issue, and then we have kind of downstream collections on the evidence, and that sort of affects that as well. So yeah. Sounds like
Alright.
a couple options.
So
Yeah.
is
There's a comment in the chat here that I linked to sort of the issue where I was trying to talk about understanding this issue more fully against the RDS case, but also trying to propose something. But if you want to do the server side filtering, that's fine and great. If you want to explore additional capabilities on config rule to have non-applicable be able to be used, definitely happy to do a breakout on that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Cool.
And there's the comment. Okay. Anything else on this one?
so the main issue is the config doesn't seem to display the results properly as well. That's part of it, right? You said on the ingest evidence side.
Yeah, that's the issue on the config side is, basically that resource, I'm not sure if it's because maybe it's expecting a different CFN type potentially for that resource, or maybe it's expecting a different resource ID. Maybe config just doesn't support it. You would think that whatever you pass in for provision, the CFN type and then also the resource ID would work the same for serverless when you add it to config. But yeah, we're noticing if you drill down on the resource, there is a mapping error. So you'll see that config is unable to identify that resource, which we've seen, many different times. We submitted a lot of different one-line PRs to kind of get that fixed for other resource types, but just kind of interesting. It all falls into the realm of Kafka clusters, but for some reason, serverless doesn't play nice with config. What we're seeing, yeah. So that's the first issue. The second one is we have existing policies with filters, and those filters are specific to provision clusters. So when the policy evaluates, it'll be flagging serverless clusters as non-compliant. So it kind of breaks backwards compatibility for us without policy updates. Basically, there are attributes that are specific to provisioned that we're filtering on.
Okay, gotcha. But there is but you would write, eventually you would write a policy to check for serverless as well in terms of compliance. I don't know exactly what policy you're writing, but I'm assuming there would be a equivalent for serverless, or no? Is it specifically only?
Potentially, yeah. We might want to break it up into separate policies, but ideally it would all just kind of function within the same policy, like we're doing,
Right.
Yeah, the same checks. But for example, if you want to check for, say, data encryption, right, or encryption at rest or something, there's a specific attribute you need to pull for provisioned, whereas for a serverless doesn't have that attribute. I believe it's encrypted by default. So we would like to bundle policies. Another example of where it doesn't make sense for serverless is if you're looking at the per topic, per broker enablement. There is no equivalent check for serverless, so that doesn't really make sense. So in that case, it's probably better to try to exclude serverless clusters.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks for the context.
Sure.
All right. Anything else on this one? This was a double here. And this was the one you all talked about when I was disconnected, right?
Yep.
All right. So that leaves that is everything we have on the agenda so far. Any of these PRs here jumping out at anyone?
So I don't have any PR or issue specific topic to talk about. I have something more high level if we're ready to move on.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is related to the whole compliance thing that we're talking about. This is again high level questions for C7M community and maybe even for Stacklet too, which is do you guys know how many companies are using Custodian or Skyclet for the purpose of compliance when it comes to audit, for example?
In production on AWS, I think the number that I last saw, which came from somewhere I can't disclose, was around 3,000.
3,000?
That it was about 2 years ago.
And do you know, do most people use, let's say, just like config, which is what Intuit right now are using, where we send data there, or?
Most do not use config. They use Custodian typically in replacement for config. In some cases, they use it as a supplement to config, which I think might fall within your sphere. A lot of AWS Pros Serve, I know, has deployed it as a set of config, has used the config capability set fairly extensively in customer engagements. Let me step back. Why? what's the actual question?
Oh, so one of the thing that we keep on hearing back from the security team and when they work with the auditor is that a lot of time, like how reputable, how trustworthy the finding or the evidence from Cloud Custodian versus others, right? So for example, a lot of the thing that Steve and I, when we talk about in config, we need to have the right mapping of the resource, and then there has to be evidence, right? Inside config, the resource, the details field, it should have all of the appropriate, evidence, things like that. And what we have found is quite a few for some of the resources, they're just not well supported in config, for example, right? And it just end up on our side, we have to do additional things to grab additional informations to provide additional evidence. So I'm just curious, if other companies have run into the same problem with either config, or they have found out they're not using config, they're using Security Hub, where they just post finding to Security Hub. But then when you post finding, I don't think you have evidence either. I think the key thing I'm trying to get here to is the evidence part, which I find to be something that is inconsistent across the different tools or services. Yeah.
So, well, whatever. We're very specific to AWS services. Let's be clear. Like, other providers are different. I mean, the AWS services all have very bespoke mappings, and as you've noticed, some of them are error prone. Like config supports select resources for 30 out of the 100 that says it supports. Like where you get the differential API support as well. And the mapping is arbitrary. Security Hub is also very arbitrary mapping on resources. And a lot of it, goes to underlying database technology choices that unfortunately leak through to the consumer API, the client API. David, you want to weigh in on this? Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, we don't heavily rely on config because there's just too many damn holes in it. I mean, we love AWS, but it's just too holy for us. And currently, we attempt to do a lot of stuff on net new resource creation, and that's not really, sure, you can attempt to do that with config, but by the time you get the data, it's too late to actually take action on something you really care about. Not too late, but it's too dangerous. Like if I have somebody spinning up an RDS and they forget to encrypt it somehow, or they make it publicly accessible, I want to deal with that immediately, and config's never going to give you that. So, I mean, and to be clear, we dump all of our logs into S3. And if anybody ever if our auditors want evidence of it working, they potentially could go there. But typically, the way our auditors work, at least so we have multiple lines of defense, but our testers who are outside of my group will go into an account specifically set up for testing of our controls, and they'll create known bad things and basically collect their own evidence that way. So they know that in my environment, if you create an S3 bucket and you decide not to put any policy on it at all, but we're going to do something about that. If you try to take an S3 bucket and make it publicly accessible, we're going to do something about that. So they create those bad resources and they collect the evidence themselves. They used to make me go hunt down the emails from all the users and then collect all the evidence, but they've gotten to the point now where our auditors just create bad resources and see what we do about it, which is a little bit hinky. But I mean, about 95% of our cloud controls are managed through Custodian. And evidence has become basically they collect their own evidence.
That's interesting. Okay. And in terms of Stacklet, I noticed that you guys have these component packs. Have they been vetted? Have they been looked at by third-party vendors or certified, anything like that?
So I don't know that this is the right forum for that discussion, but I am, happy to have a conversation about it. That would probably definitely trying to keep a reasonable wall on community versus commercial products in the space. So yeah, I'll leave that there. I mean, I'm happy to talk about our experiences, but in terms of product features and pitches, then that feels not,
Yeah, understand.
Question.
That's all I have.
I did want to ask people about C7 and left and evaluating Terraform earlier in the pipeline. I was looking at our download numbers for it, and they're pretty low, but it's really awesome. And we're trying to build out some more stuff on it. This is basically, and so I was just curious, are people interested in doing enforcement earlier in the pipelines? Do you have access to be able to push things to pipelines? Does
oh heck,
resonate in general?
Yeah, definitely for us into it. That's something that we are actively working on. Unfortunately, we're not a Terraform shop. I think I mentioned that to you before. Right now it's CFN and CDK. And then we're also doing outside of cloud resources too, but with Kubernetes resources. But for that, we're looking more into existing tool like Gatekeeper. I think I mentioned that before when Sunny was demoing some of the Kubernetes related stuff. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. But definitely shifting left and shifting, doing things outside of cloud resources. That's something that we're interested in.
At least for C7 and left and adding CloudFormation support, it would be through the AWS CC, the cloud control provider. That's what it would or the resource, the policies would be compatible between the two there, where a policy you write against the left would work against the right with that provider, more specifically. But noted.
Yeah, definitely interesting in what system and can support, because right now, as I mentioned, we have, I would say, two policies languages that we use, one for, I would say, runtime, right? And then one for build time. But since we are right now, we're using Lego just for writing policy to check against CloudFormation template at build time. So we have our CI/CD pipeline, and anytime when people want to deploy some CloudFormation changes, it go through our pipeline, and we have regular policies to check. And of course, we want to have a single policy language that can use across both runtime and build time. That's for us is the ideal state.
Right. I know AWS has been pushing CFN guard space as well. I don't think I've seen Rego used in this context as much. I've seen it with Terraform, but yeah, fair, cool.
And then one thing, since we're talking about sysadmin lab, have you heard about config proactive mode?
Yes, there's a PR up for it. I've realized it's almost useless. Like some of our previous discussion about config, I think because I'm being polite. So I thought it was actually hooking into CFN hooks, but it doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
All it is a node on the effectively the proactive part is you do more work.
Yeah.
So there's a PR up for it. I can merge it. Like it's harmless and easy to do. And I tested it out, but like it basically means that you have to extract from your template, like you have to extract your resources from your templates in a very particular format.
That's the problem right now is they don't support template level. You have to grab the exact, I would say, the resource that is being changed. And then you want, which we did provide feedback to them, and they actually say that that is the #1 feedback that all the users or beta user have been giving them. So they do plan to add support for template support and adding support to CFN hook.
So I was looking at directly supporting CFN hook in the AWS CC provider independent because, you know, like I said, I used it. Here's a PR, by the way, and I document. It also only supports like a handful, like again, only like most things config. It only supports a handful of their resources.
Yeah.
Like, so it almost feels useless to me. Like, rather, I'm happy to support it, but like there's the laundry list of caveats on it is pretty large. But from offering a general capability here, it's AWS CC provider supporting CFN hook directly. And I made a stab at that earlier, but for poor choice on my part, I tried to not use the SDK that they provided, and it sort of exhausted the time that I had on it. Let me pull up what I'm talking about. Yeah, so I had a draft hook where I tried to eschew the use of the CFN hook SDK, partly because it was using a couple of encryption libraries that felt like superfluous, and it wasn't really clear why they were using them that way because it was basically an decrypt call. But at this point, there's enough magic under the hood on how the environment that CFN hooks operate in, because it's not actually a Lambda. It's like running on EC2 instances inside of the CloudFormation accounts, where it's a little bit weird. And you have to do a lot of multiplexing between different credentials and different environments. So it's probably better just to use the underlying SDK. But to get back to your point, like, yes, we can support proactive mode. It looks almost useless to me. And second, we can support CFN hook mode, but we'll do that directly, and it'll be independent of this. Obviously, if they eventually supported that via, then we would get that for free.
I added those pull requests to the notes that you tossed in there. Anything else?
I didn't want to let the meeting close without saying thanks to Darren for the Shield work, that Shield, the Elastic IP wonkiness. Since we talked about resource ID mismatches earlier, that was a weird one, and definitely did not have the resource available to test that properly. So thanks a lot for picking that up.
Happy to help.
And that's here, just George, to keep the link in there, 8272.
Yep, got it. Put that out as a shout out, actually. We did close more PRs than we opened this week, so that's good. We closed 39, but opened 26. So that doesn't happen often.
Actually, this is a good topic. I'd actually like to get to Black and automatic formatting. And there's a proposal up as a GitHub issue And so I'm trying to, like, it's good practice anyways, but I'm trying to draw down on some of our stuff. It's 81. So I'm trying to draw down on some PRs and just get through some stuff. There's some additional tooling I built in tools just to show like what are the open PRs open against directory. So we're gonna have to do this incrementally, I think. Here, let me drop the issue if I could find it.
I have a dumb question on this. What were we using before? I've heard of Black.
I've
only ever worked on a thing that used it already.
So Black is both an automatic formatter as well as a linter, let's say. We were just before. We weren't using any automatic formatters. And so there was a lot of stylistic, like everyone would, you know, we have like what 370 contributors and like everyone comes with a different style and like, you know, it shows. Different files, like it's potpourri of what you're going to get per se. And this will give us a little bit of uniformness. And I've resisted it mostly in the past, mostly because like we have so many extant PRs. Like if you use a linter on something, like use a formatter on something, you're going to break every extant PR against that file. And it was just hard to draw down. But I wanted to treat it like we did the Python 2 to 3 transition as something we do gradually, and we get like something green in passing, and then it goes into like it won't fail again on Python 3, and sort of just do it as a more gradual approach. For the purposes of like blame tools and other things, there's like a git ignore commit. So there's a way to configure git as well as GitHub to ignore certain formatting only commits. So we'll just add to that as we do this incrementally. I did want to at least try to get one big batch up. The tool that I built to try to make this reasonable about was this thing. It's also just useful, I think, in general, but it can show you like which PR is such a certain directory, so to speak. It basically grabs all the extant PRs, grabs all the files in them, and then you point it to local directories, and it lets you figure out which ones have been changed.
This is prcheck.py you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Got it. I'll see URL in chat there. So will there be, just a question, will there be like a switch that you turn on, like all new PRs will start to at some point, or?
It'll be, so we already have it actually on one directory for the C7 on left repo, directory currently has CI checks on Black.
Got you.
We'll just add to that list effectively. So effectively, you'll basically get a lint failure as we gradually dial this up.
Okay, so what method, I guess my question is, what method are you doing? Are you just going to add directories like a few every week, or are you going to group it by Azure first, or, like what?
It's not fully fleshed out yet.
Okay, all right.
Like my main goal at the moment was to try to draw down as much as possible on XMPRs. There's a list of like 20 directories we could just do right now. And so, but after that, I think, like after we do an initial batch, I think it's going to be an open question. Like, I think it's going to involve a lot of like old PR review. I mean, like, does this still make sense? Is this mergeable? Is this, like, it'll be a lot of PR review triage, because I don't want to enable it on PRs. If we have a PR that we may conceivably merge against something, then against a directory that isn't formatted yet, or then we shouldn't enable formatting on that directory till that's merged.
Right.
That's all this is to do. And so we'll get some initial set going, and then we'll try to draw down on open PRs. And that might be closing them, that might be merging them, it depends. And then as we do that, we can dial up on the formatting.
Got you. And then end state is just blocking on the linter in the PR,
Right.
like other
Well,
tests, right?
well, it'll the NSA is removing all the individual directory linting commands to just
Yeah.
do the whole directory, do the whole path.
Got you. All right. Sorry, I've never lived through one of these before, so I just wanted to see what that's like. Okay. Anything else? All right. With that, everyone have 15 minutes back. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Cheers.